I literally feel like I'm gonna go into like diabetic shock, and I'm not even a diabetic. I haven't had that much sugar in a very long time. My body is not used to it.
Yeah.
What
can we do for you? Do you need a carrot? Do you need a stalk of celery?
Carrot?
Like we have like actual carrots, not baby carrots.
I feel like to offset that Icee, I need like
salt,
like a chicken breast.
Well, we are fresh out of those.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Ride Home podcast. My name is Abby.
Hey, guys, it's Caitlin.
I am currently in a sugar crash because I went out on a limb and got an Icee tonight, which I usually order a bottle of water at the movies. So if I, collapse throughout this process, I'll just let Caitlin take over. And
guys, I'm like scared. Like I'm fearing everything in my life right now. I'm scared. I'm really scared.
I feel a little odd, but it's okay. We're gonna power through.
Okay, we're gonna power through.
And we are going to talk about the movie that we just saw, which I think we are both very excited to talk about. And that is Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. I am also just like happy that we're doing a Marvel movie. Like I feel like
it's been a minute.
I don't even remember the last Marvel movie we reviewed, to be honest with you.
Was it Doctor Strange?
Have we only done one?
I feel not me going to our own podcast to see what we've done previous. Oh, Thor: Love and Thunder.
Oh, okay.
That was the last one. And that was on July 8th.
So we've only done 2 Marvel movies, and our last one was quite some time ago.
Was quite some time ago.
So if you are new to the podcast and you don't know our Marvel level of communication, I have seen all of the Marvel content. I am a fan of the movies, but I don't know that much about the comics.
Sure.
Caitlin has seen most.
A decent amount.
Yeah.
Probably 75%.
If you're looking for like a deep dive of lore and comparing the comics to the movie, this isn't the conversation.
It won't be us.
So we're going to look at this from a pure perspective of just like the movie.
Right.
So whether or not we liked it as a movie, as a story, these characters, how they are.
Sure.
So just wanted to like precurse that before we get into it. I will again remind you guys that it will be spoiler free up until the point that we play our little elevator music, and we will let you know when we shift into the spoiler section. So to get into the spoiler-free initial review, Caitlin, what are your thoughts and feelings coming out of the theater?
I have too many thoughts and feelings to even know where to begin.
You can't even like wrap it up.
It is really hard to wrap up my thoughts and feelings about this one, but I will say that I loved it.
Could you do like 3 words?
I'll do you one better. Okay. I'll do 4 words.
All right.
And it's a complete sentence, kind of more of a fragment, I guess.
Yeah.
Better than the first one.
Wow. That's a big statement.
And I can say that confidently because we just watched the first one last night. Because I have only seen the first one time. Did we see it in theaters?
We may have seen it in theaters, or it was shortly after.
Yeah, you just showed it to me. So I've only seen it once. And when we were going to see this, I was like, hey, can we watch the first one again just so I could get a little refresh?
Yeah.
Which I was really glad that I did. That was very helpful for me, a person who's not as familiar with the Marvel.
I think it would have been hard for you to jump back in.
And I don't think I would have felt as strongly as I do had we not watched the first one. So I can confidently say that this was a better movie than the first one. I enjoyed it significantly more than the first one. And I'm going to just bill Marvel for my therapy bill. Marvel will be paying my next therapy session.
There was not a dry eye in that room.
Holy hell.
I'm also really glad that we watched the first one last night because I wanted to kind of revisit whether or not it was as good of a movie as I remembered it, and how like the film world and society kind of like put it on this really huge pedestal at the time. I mean, it's the only Marvel movie to be nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah.
And I think one of the weirdest things about last night was that even though I enjoyed it, I was like, there are some like flaws to this movie.
Yeah.
And I also thought that performances that I really liked the first time around, I didn't necessarily love. Like, I loved Killmonger the first time I saw it. And then this watch through, I was like, I'm like not really buying it.
Yeah.
And T'Challa's best friend, who's Daniel Kaluuya, like his character switching sides was very sudden, and there was just a lot of small issues that overall, yes, of course, it was like this very overwhelmingly beautiful movie. And also Chadwick Boseman played such a good and true hero. Like
incredible.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, coming out of this movie, I felt so many more things.
Yeah.
Then like even I thought like rewatching the original after his death would like hit me more. I was moved significantly more
and
from
like
this movie
right off the rip,
without giving any spoilers to even, I mean, Marvel purists. It's like you can't even like touch anything.
No, don't say a word.
The first quarter of the movie really did spend a lot of time on the loss of T'Challa, which the way that they handled his death in this was very beautiful, I thought, and very respectful.
Yeah.
And, you know, the first quarter of the movie is really everybody in his life kind of handling the loss. And there were some really heavy moments that as an audience, you're like mourning the character and the actor at the same time. And it was like not a dry eye in the room.
Not
like,
at all.
It was very powerful.
The feelings and the impact that those moments, I think, had on us as an audience. We were talking about it like when we left the movie, like our friend Kevin went with us tonight, and like we all agreed, like it felt like we were at a funeral. Like we literally physically were at a funeral grieving with the characters and the actors, because you think about the core cast from the original movie had to shoot this without him. And I can only imagine the weight like going into this movie, but potentially like the levity that they came out of this movie with.
Yeah. And I think too, they had the opportunity to make a almost morose movie.
Sure.
You know, like it was, you're treading such a fine line of whether or not you make basically the entire thing just a giant tribute, eulogy almost. And I thought that they found the perfect balance of emphasizing that, but also having a really great action adventure superhero Marvel fantasy movie. Yeah. And so being able to find that balance, I have to just like hats off to, you know, Ryan Coogler and everybody involved, because like it was, I honestly think that it was done perfectly in terms of that balance.
Just the tact and the finesse that took to pull something like that off. And it had to be Ryan Coogler because he saw it through the first time. And I think honestly, like Black Panther walked so that Wakanda Forever could run.
Yeah, no, for real.
Like truly. Yeah. Like this movie, I'm just gonna say I think it's my second favorite Marvel movie. Like
it's up there for me.
Shang-Chi is still my favorite.
Yeah.
But this is gonna probably be number 2 just because of like how much depth and emotion and, like you said, really great action, like beautiful action and battles and combat. And like you also said, the fantasy piece too, like just incredible.
And again, going back to, you know, the balance is that I was a little bit worried that we were going to have basically like a T'Challa sized hole throughout the movie. And I thought that the entire time, like I was going to miss him. And it was weird because it was almost like how grief plays out in real life, that like you do miss that person, but also like reality is that they're not there, and you like learn to accept it. And I feel like at the beginning of the movie, again, we were like almost grieving him at his funeral, and then as the movie goes on, it's like he's there and he's like a part of the conversation, and he's in the back of your mind, but also like you're not like sitting there thinking, well, this movie sucks without him.
Right, like where's T'Challa?
Right. I thought it was a very natural movement out of like his era and into what we got with this movie.
I agree. And I think really the only way that they were able to pull that off is with the storyline of Namor and that whole world, because what a fucking treat that was.
So before we get into Namor, I'm just going to give
we're getting carried away. The heart of this movie is just wooed us.
So the Google synopsis, so there are no spoilers here, read word for word, is Queen Ramonda, Shuri, M'Baku, and Okoye fight to protect their nation from intervening world powers in the wake of King T'Challa's death. As the Wakandans strive to embrace their next chapter, the heroes must band together with Nakia and Everett Ross to forge a new path for their beloved kingdom. All of the old cast besides Daniel Kaluuya is back, and obviously, you know, Chadwick Boseman lost his life to cancer. And so we have still this like electrifying cast that is just like incredible across the board. And by saying this, I mean nothing against the rest of the cast, but Namor showed up. Namor stole every scene that he was in. And this is not a spoiler because he is throughout the trailers and he is, you know, known. He is a mutant undersea god, basically. And we get his whole backstory and we know how he got his powers and all of that. So everything about his character design, the place where he's from, which is called, I might butcher the name, but Talokan, which is basically Atlantis almost,
but like cooler. Like the Mexican version of Atlantis.
Every single thing about his character was incredible, and honestly, I'm just gonna say it right now, my favorite Marvel villain, period.
Oh, for sure.
He was,
hands down.
He was complex. He was attractive. Like, very, like, everything that came out of his mouth was like sexy. Even if he was just saying like, "Welcome to my kingdom," it was hot. Like, his costume was just gorgeous,
beautiful,
and everything about the world around him and his people. I feel like I don't even need to see Avatar now, because like, who cares about that?
Like fuck Avatar.
Avatar. I already have like a undersea water people. Like, I'm good. So if I was to say, beside the really well developed portrait of grief and how each person deals with that, which I think that was in and of itself like one of the strongest parts of the movie. The second strongest part was just Namor and his people and their storyline and how that tied into Wakanda throughout the movie.
Impressive.
It was so like
good. Really, really good. Like beautiful to look at. Like you said, not just, I mean, him for sure. Like he said, he was the star for sure.
He can get it. Oh my God.
Yeah, he can definitely get it. Namor can get it. But even his people were cool. Like their costumes were beautiful.
Everything about it.
The details, like, to me, like, this is what some of the other Marvel movies are lacking, in my opinion, in like the villain category, is just like the attention to detail. Because like you said, his backstory, which we'll get into this in like the spoiler part, but like his backstory and the people's backstory and the culture of their like that whole world was so fully developed. that like shits on a lot of other Marvel movies, in my opinion, as far as like developing the enemy.
Right. Like, I really loved Christian Bale's character in Thor: Love and Thunder, but like, he as a person was developed. Like, his motivations and his performance was amazing.
Sure.
He was terrifying to look at.
Yeah.
So the opposite of Namor, which Namor is like gorgeous. And so that balance of like also kind of understanding his motivations, almost like Killmonger, where you're like sympathetic to his wants and needs, and that complexity there was portrayed so well across the board that this villain story and Namor himself was not only probably like my favorite part of the movie, but again, he is hands down now my favorite Marvel villain.
I will definitely have to agree with you on that.
And the actor was so good.
Okay, so like, let's just talk about him for 1 minute, because he deserves more than a minute.
Yeah.
His name is Tenoch Huerta, and he really has only ever been in like Spanish movies. I looked him up because I noticed in the credits at the end it said introducing Tenoch Huerta, and I was like, introducing, like that means like he's really never
like brand new.
Like he's not starred in like a mainstream movie, which he hasn't, and he did amazing, and he ate that character up. And I hope that we get to see more of him in other movies, because he a little bit felt like he's like classically trained or something.
He felt very
like he felt elevated to me.
Yeah, he did. The whole cast from Wakanda was also incredible, and amazing. I'm not going to, put that down. They all gave incredible performances, and you really truly did feel their characters' grief, and you could see like the actors' grief pouring through for sure. But again, I just gotta give my hats off to Namor, because
he crushed it.
He was so good.
So we've been gushing so far about this movie, and for those of you who are not familiar so much with Abby's reviews of movies, there's usually always something that she doesn't like about
movies. There's a catch.
There's always a catch. So before we get into like the spoiler part, I want to know if you have any hang-ups.
I do have a hang-up.
All right, let's hear it. Lay it on me.
I felt that, and this is not a spoiler either, I felt that they kind of did Riri / Ironheart a little bit dirty. It felt a little bit like almost like a James Rhodes from Iron Man, where it's
they're kind of like a throwaway.
They're there, and they help out, and she's really tied into the plot, and so she's kind of important to be there. But I thought that basically the only character trait they gave her was, oh, you're an American and everybody else is Wakandan,
and she's smart.
And so it was like she was the American version of Shuri, and I was just like, that, like, it wasn't, I didn't hate it. It wasn't something that like bothered me by any means. Like, I'm not going that far, but I would just say that
it could have been better. So besides the issue, anything else?
Not really.
Okay.
I enjoyed every 2 hours and plus minutes of it.
1,000 minutes.
It felt very long, and I know that part of it is just seeing it on a weeknight at the end of a work day. You know, I was kind of just
like it's been a long
day. And so I will say that every scene held my attention. Every character had really great moments. Both of us are huge M'Baku fans, and he has a really nice big part in this, and it was great seeing him on screen. And I thought Shuri played a really strong, complex, we got to watch her entire grief process basically play out, which was amazing.
Angela Bassett is a literal queen.
I don't know how somebody can age that well. Obviously, she's not Caucasian. She doesn't have a touch of the touch of the white, which we age so badly.
We don't handle it well.
No, we are raisins.
But she's doing great. She's jacked, and she's 64 years old.
Jeez.
And she looks like she's like 35. Like, I mean,
she looks better than me.
But like, she looks healthier and more radiant than I ever will. So hats off to Angela Bassett, the true queen of all queens.
Yeah, I thought that the cast overall just did amazing. And then the visuals, the cinematography, the graphics, the VFX, like everything was close to perfection.
It really, really was.
I think there was one shot maybe where I was just like, that was a little weird. Like, actually, it wasn't one shot. It was one thing. It was the whatever effect they make it so that you can levitate up into the Wakandan ship.
Oh, yeah.
It was used multiple times. I wasn't a huge fan of how that looked.
Yeah.
But everything else looked amazing.
Yeah, it really did.
And before we go into the spoiler section, I just need to touch on, I will say that this was hands down the best music in any Marvel project, and one of the most standout soundtracks of a movie I've seen this year.
Truly.
Every single character had a theme, even like groups of characters. Namor's people had their own. Namor had, and it was like truly one of those thematic soundtracks similar to Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. I cannot say anything negative about that soundtrack, and I'm probably gonna find it on Spotify tomorrow
for sure
if I can.
It was incredible, and I think what made it so incredible is just the cultures that I was drawing from, because Namor's people are Aztec and indigenous people, basically are their like origins. They're pulling from
Didn't they say they literally speak Mayan, like ancient Mayan?
Yes, that's what their language was.
Yeah.
So like they're pulling from that indigenous music, and then the Wakandan music, of course, is tribal African music, and the two of those cultures, like not only musically mixing, but just seeing the cultures mix as characters on the screen was also a beautiful meld.
And it also incorporated, obviously we have a couple of scenes with Martin Freeman's character, who's like an American FBI agent, and we got very traditional like action movie music. And with Riri being incorporated, and even just Shuri herself is very modern and attached to, the modern world. And so we got a little bit of hip hop in there too. And I just thought that on paper, all of those types of music shouldn't sound great together.
Yeah.
But it was interwoven absolutely perfectly throughout.
It definitely was. On that note, let's give our little popcorn scores.
It's an easy one for
me
both
as well.
Of us, I think.
It's going to be a large.
It is a large.
Yeah, I feel like it's obvious that we were going to give it a large. Yeah. Because we have just been overflowing with positive things to say about this movie.
It felt like how I felt leaving Shang-Chi, where I was like, I want to go see this in theaters again. And unfortunately, like I missed it and I didn't go back to see Shang-Chi, which I'm still kicking myself. But I do want to go see this one again in a theater, because truly it was a magical experience. Yeah. See it on the best screen you can see it. Give yourself 3 hours to just feel all the feels, see all of the things. It's funny. I thought it was funnier than the first one too.
I did too.
And naturally funny.
That's what I was going to say. It wasn't trying too hard.
No, it was not. And I think I understand why the first one probably has more of a critical score rating, because again, it was like a cultural moment almost. But again, I'm gonna agree with your first 4 words of review, which is it is better than the first one. I really do agree with that. Welcome back to the spoiler portion of the podcast, where we get to unpack all of the things that we were just talking about
yes,
a little bit more.
Things that we've been dying to talk about.
So I'm going to start with just the open of the movie, which was really interesting because I, going into it, could have sworn that they were going to have T'Challa, you know, obviously we weren't going to see his death on screen, but I really thought that he was going to die in battle and we were going to find out about it.
Right.
And I think it was incredibly powerful that they decided to instead have him pass away from a mysterious illness, which kind of like they alluded to, it was cancer.
Right.
And one of the characters even said something about how he kept this illness hidden from everyone and he was suffering so much, but was still showing up for Wakanda and, you know, was still fighting as the Black Panther. And that nod to Chadwick and how he kept it hidden and was pushing through and filming movies and going to premieres and visiting children's hospitals and nobody knew that he was sick.
Yep.
And I thought that nod to the person was beautifully handled. And the funeral scene, which
beautiful,
is in the trailer, just absolutely gorgeous. Like everything about that opening section where they really truly dedicated that time to Chadwick was amazing.
It was beautiful. And then the moment that got me,
it's the moment that got everybody,
was right after that when the Marvel credits roll in, and it was just a super cut of Chadwick like as the Black Panther, and the Marvel theme song did not play. That alone, the silence, the silence in the theater, it was just like freaking like raw emotions,
because it was the standard Marvel open, like that graphic treatment,
right?
But it was just images of him and complete silence.
No music.
I think the room was composed of 98% men. I think we were maybe 2 of 4 females in that room. And when I tell you there were audible sniffles and like you could see people wiping tears away, those were all grown men, and they were like, it was enough to make a grown man cry. And
and it was just the intentionality behind that to me was just the most thoughtful thing that anyone could ever do, because it was just like the care and precision and intention behind that whole opening of the movie was just like the nicest eulogy that you could ever give someone. That to me was just the most brilliant way to start this movie.
And I think what was so great about that moment of silence was that it was acknowledging that it was not T'Challa. Like it was directly acknowledging like Chadwick. And then when it ended, it was like the whole audience as like a collective like took a breath, and then it was like, okay, let's start
the story. Let's start the next chapter. Basically is what that allowed us to all do, is to kind of have that space to grieve and mourn both, again, Black Panther and T'Challa and Chadwick Boseman, and then to kind of get started with the amazing story that was told.
And I think the number one spoiler is who is Black Panther in this movie. And to be honest with you, the person who ended up being Black Panther going into tonight was the last person I wanted to be Black Panther, because it was kind of the obvious choice. Because Shuri, I don't know. I've heard that in the comics she picks up Black Panther at some point.
Okay.
And just by like familial relation, it would be the most reasonable and natural process for her to pick up the mantle. And so it's really interesting because she was developing, because at the end of the first movie, Killmonger burns all of the heart-shaped herb, which is what makes the Black Panther. And so Shuri basically is trying to synthetically create that. she was eventually going to crack the code and be able to make it. And obviously there was going to be a Black Panther. And for a split second, I was convinced that it was going to be Nakia. Because when Queen Ramonda goes to Haiti to basically convince her to like come back and help and all of that, I was like, okay, this is like the return of the hero, and you know, she's gonna pick up the mantle and honor her, like the love of her life. And I was convinced that it was gonna be her, and I had this whole story played out in my head. And then when Shuri got it and she took the herb, I was like not sure, but then how they handled it after that, I thought was perfect for her character. And even though she's not the Black Panther I want or need, the way that she struggles with it was really masterfully done. Because if this very young, immature, sometimes hot-headed and impulsive person picked up this mantle with like deep responsibility, while she's in an active state of mourning not only her brother, but also she loses her mom in this. So the queen dies in this movie, right? And so having her pick that up, and then I was just like, is she just going to become this like perfect hero now? And Shuri saves the day. It like just wouldn't
T'Challa, the girl version.
It wouldn't have been natural at all. And I think what was really interesting was that they really pointed that she was the Black Panther that Wakanda needed in that moment, but was very clear that she will not be the Black Panther forever.
For the duration.
And I know that I don't know if you know this, but the actress who plays her, Letitia Wright, she was anti-vax. And so there were some questions about like her moving forward with Marvel, and I don't know her if like she will continue at all, or if it's gonna be like Shuri's off the map now. But I'm curious as to like if they made any changes to their original script plan.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I do know that the script that they eventually came up with was absolutely perfect for the character that they developed with
100%. Perfectly played out, with the nod to Killmonger being the one that appears to her when she like goes to the ancestral realm or whatever. Like that was sick. And like he looked so fine in his white cardigan.
And his longer hair. He looked very nice. That was such a interesting thing because she also throughout the movie was playing the agnostic scientist role where she didn't necessarily believe in all of that. And she, I think because she is a scientist, she just truly believed that like you're the Black Panther because you have vibranium in your system.
Right.
Like that's
like,
it.
That's how it works.
That's how it is.
Yeah.
And for her going to this ancestral realm and wanting so desperately to see her mom, and the fact that she sees Killmonger instead really does kind of shine like a spotlight on her imperfections and what she's struggling with, and
her doubts and
her like hatred towards, you know, Namor, who killed her mom. And that thirst for revenge. I thought that was really interesting how they brought him in for that, because when he first showed up on screen, I was like, really? Like Killmonger?
Yeah.
But then like it made sense. Basically everything made sense.
We'll never question Ryan Coogler. There were certain moments like I kind of agree with you where I was like, wait, that's what they're doing? But then they explained it.
Yep.
And they made it make sense. And they somehow made it be amazing. Like every single time. Like you would be like, well, that's a choice. But then it was like, oh, but of course
it is.
Yeah. Like why didn't I think of that?
Right. I also thought that Namor's arc was really beautifully told.
Yeah.
We really got to know who he was culturally. We got to know like what his motivations were. We got his really good and sometimes heroic sides, and then we also got to see his dark and selfish in a way, like very not just selfish for himself but selfish for his people. And in a way it's interesting because I noticed that he is kind of the darker, or like the anti-hero version of T'Challa. Yeah. Because in the first movie, T'Challa's whole concern was like, we can't let people into Wakanda. And that's been the tradition of the kings before him. Right. To protect Wakanda. Because if people knew what Wakanda was, they would plunder it and attack it. And it would just be a constant barrage of people trying to steal their resources. And his whole thing was, you know, we need to protect it. And Killmonger's like, no, you need to share your resources. Yeah. And obviously his ending and his path is much different than Namor's. But Namor basically is like the more vindictive, godlike version of T'Challa, where if he doesn't get his way, he won't empathize with the other party. Right. You know, he is protecting his people, and at the same time he's very respectful, and he's very charming, and he's a true lover of his people. Like he calls them his children. Like he says my child to all of those people. Right. And so it was very interesting because I felt like there were a lot of connections between like T'Challa in the first one and Namor in this one. And it was like we saw basically what we could have gotten if T'Challa wasn't such a good, empathetic person and was more of, you know, that other like flip side.
I also thought it was interesting kind of how the culture sort of converged too, because it was like you said, like both kind of like hidden gems in the world, in this universe, in different ways. And they both have kind of different sets of advantages and disadvantages. The Talokans have their little sets of tricks and trinkets, and then the Wakandans have their little sets of tricks and trinkets. And it was kind of really cool to see how they came together. Like, not obviously they didn't come together like unified, but like how the battle scenes between them and how their different sets of weapons played out. And
any scene that involved Namor and his people fighting, I just wanted more of it. Like, they're launching off of whales.
Yes. Fucking Free Willy just like shows up.
They're actual sirens singing soldiers off of ships, which I thought that was so cool. Yes. And their partial like human, partial underwater voices were really like haunting, but like cool at the same time.
They have those little like masks with water over their
so
face.
They can breathe above water. I loved everything about, and they really held back nothing in terms of developing their history. They gave us the whole thing. And honestly, like, I would have been so upset if they didn't, because it was such a beautiful world that it deserved to have the full story told. And I'm so glad that they told it. Yes. They gave us everything.
Yes. And I think they had to, honestly, because we know everything about Wakanda already. We know their history. We know their culture. And to introduce a whole new set of people from a whole nother world, like, you had to match that level of origin. You had to match that level of history and culture that we have and we have been experiencing from Wakanda. Right. And so that's exactly what they did, is they completely immersed us into Talokan, into Namor's world. And it was just amazing.
Visually stunning throughout. Also, like, I can't begin to describe enough how many chills I got in any scene that involved Namor, like, floating. Like, just this powerful figure just floating above, like, sometimes in the darkness, sometimes
above water.
Like, just so incredible. And I feel like this is like the Namor show, but like I can't stop thinking about how
Abby Hart's Namor.
Yeah, I literally can't stop thinking about how much of a incredible character this person is. And I think what's interesting was that at the end of the movie, Shuri kind of unlocks a little piece of Namor where it's like, we're in this together, and like they're gonna come after us because they want what we have, but together we're unstoppable. And that alliance moving forward is a really exciting thing that like I'm wondering what's gonna happen from here, and if we're gonna get to see Namor again. And
I fucking hope so.
And you know what, guys, we might have a new Black Panther in the future.
Might have a new Black Panther.
Yep.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about the scene that made Caitlin openly sob in the theater. For Marvel fans, you all know the credit scene, and if you're not like a super Marvel fan, you're just tuning in for this, like every single Marvel movie has a scene that takes place in the middle of the credits, and often another one at the end. And this one was Shuri basically leaves Wakanda and goes to Haiti to be with Nakia, who is obviously T'Challa's lover from the past.
Right.
And she helps Shuri accept everything that happened and actually do like a grieving tradition, like a Wakanda tradition where you burn the clothes that you wear to the funeral.
While the garb is burning, she has flashbacks of T'Challa, which was already enough to send me over the edge. Just seeing him on screen again in such an uplifting way of like Shuri saying her final goodbyes to him, and like again giving the audience a final chance to say goodbye to him. So I was already a wreck. But then they bring out this beautiful child who has a precious little lisp. He says to Shuri that his mom tells him that she's good at keeping secrets, and she says, yes, I am. And he says, Toussaint is my Haitian name. And then she says in the Wakandan language, who are you? And he says, my name is Prince T'Challa, son of King T'Challa. And I was a puddle on the floor.
You like fell to pieces.
I like literally was like sobbing uncontrollably.
When he said his real name, I like audibly heard you like gasp, and like there were multiple other people in the theater that were wiping tears away from their eyes in that cutscene.
Definitely.
And I think it was a really great way to end, because they didn't do any other cutscenes for like leading into other projects. Like it was just that one cutscene, and it was kind of like a very clear, this is the direction we're going. We're gonna have another T'Challa. Yep. He will be the Black Panther. Again, I was worried about Shuri, and I was not sold on her, and I really couldn't see her like leading this character into the future. And yeah, I just think that this movie was an exercise in like trusting the process, because there were so many points throughout that, again, what you said earlier, like you raised your eyebrows of like, where is this going here? But the culmination of all of those feelings that you process throughout the movie, but then also the enjoyment of watching this incredible action movie with some of the coolest and most original fight sequences I've ever seen. Just what a fucking ride that was.
A whole experience.
Well, that just about wraps up our gush fest for Ryan Coogler, Namor, Wakanda.
Gush Fest 2022.
I'm excited because next week we will be slightly dipping our toes back into spooky season. There is a kind of horror psychological thriller type movie called The Menu, which has been getting a lot of really good buzz. So we're very excited for that. And in the meantime, if you have any free time this weekend and you are a Marvel fan of any way, shape, or form, or honestly, if you aren't and you just want to see like one of the coolest visual accomplishments I've seen so far this year, couldn't suggest going to a theater and seeing this on the big screen more. Please do not wait for it to be on Disney Plus. That is a chump move, and I will never forgive you for doing that.
We implore you to please see Wakanda Forever.
All right, everybody. I hope you have a great weekend. Stay safe and dry if you are caught in the tropical storm at all. And we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks for joining us on the ride home.